It's 2018 and I'm walking through the streets of Amsterdam. I'm 18 years old and it's the first day of my solo travel around Europe, backpacking. I was travelling for about 1 month. It was early in the morning, it was a cold September's day in Amsterdam. The streets were alive with the sound of people shopping, travelling, touristically endeavouring through the streets. And I had arrived the night before and I had the whole day free to myself. I was couch surfing around a local's house and he had recommended me to, if I was up for it, try the local truffles. Now, truffles are a psychedelic which are a little bit less intense than the typical magic mushrooms. They still contain psilocybin within them, but they're a little bit less intense. My one rule when I was travelling was to say yes to absolutely everything that came my way, every opportunity, apart from heroin and every other drug apart from magic mushrooms. So I said yes. So I woke up, I went to the local shop where you could buy these truffles and I spoke to the locals about which ones they would recommend me to take. So I was 18 years old, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. There were variations within the intensity of the truffles that you could take. The space shuttles were the top ones, so I decided to take the first level. I wanted to start slowly. I had the whole day ahead of me, like I said, so I thought I'd better get some food. And I bought some weed brownies, which were only somatic, so you only felt the physical sensations, not the cognitive sensations. So I walked through the streets, I was playing my music, it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, I want some nature. So I went to a local park and I sat down. And I took the mushrooms. They tasted horrible, but I thought, this is what you do. When in Rome, have some truffles. And I sat up against a tree, but I realised I'm pretty hungry. And it's been an hour. The truffles haven't even kicked in yet. Usually it takes about 1 hour, 1.5 hours for them to kick in, so I thought, I'm going to go on a walk. And I started walking, and I was quite far from the park that I had arrived in, and I realised that the only food I had on me was the weed brownies. So I had one, didn't satisfy my hunger, so I had 4. All of a sudden I was waiting for the brownies to kick in and the mushrooms to kick in as well. And I thought I'd better make it back to safe ground, so I walked back to the park and leant up against the tree. I laid there an hour and a half after I had taken the brownies and the mushrooms, and I stared at the grass, and suddenly the grass started dancing and waving in the wind, and I thought, oh no, it's happening. And I closed my eyes, and for the next 3 hours I tripped out of my mind and spoke to some woman of the universe where she asked me what I wanted and I didn't know what to respond. And I woke up from the trip, still tripping and wanting to write it all down, went to articulate what I was experiencing in words and just realised I had no idea how to explain this trip in words. And then I realised I'm alone in a country I've never been in before. I know no one here, and this is the first day of me travelling completely alone around Europe, and I'm 18 years old. And suddenly I started to get really paranoid with loneliness, and I started to feel this overwhelming sensation of wanting to connect with people but feeling so distant from how everyone else was walking about their day-to-day business, just completely unaffected with what I was feeling inside, and this desire to talk to them and be a part of their journey. And I started to feel very lonely and very sad. But then I had a thought, right, I need to return home. I contemplated it for 20 minutes. I thought I was going to go back to the couch surfing house that I was staying in, pack up all my stuff and then travel back to the UK and admit defeat on the first day and realise that I longed for the comforts of home. But then I continued walking through the streets and unpacking this in my mind, still on the mushroom trip, but not as hallucinogenic. I was just feeling the after effects of the emotional high, and I was slowly coming out the other side of a 3-hour trip. And in the distance, across the canal, about 100 metres in front of me, I saw a man sitting on a bench. And I was wrapped up in social anxiety at this point because I knew the typical way to speak to someone is just to go up to them and speak to them. But I felt like I had no capacity to do that. But I continued to fix my gaze on this man who was sat there in the sun on a bench by himself, smoking a big joint. He had dreadlocks as long as his torso. And I thought, that's my chance. He's my opportunity for connection. So I made the pilgrimage to him. I walked 100 meters, continuously ruminating in my head, how am I going to start this conversation? How am I going to start this conversation? How am I going to start this conversation? Continuously seeing everyone going about their day, getting even more overwhelmed with the experience of being alone. And I thought, I have no idea, I'm just going to go up to him. So I went up to him, but in the most awkward way I could possibly imagine. This man who sat there enjoying the sun, just reveling in the bliss of life. I went up to him and I said, excuse me? And he went, yes. And I said, I'm really lonely. Can I have a conversation with you? And he went, yeah, of course. Sit down. And suddenly I was accepted back into the social world and I could sit down and we spoke for 3 hours. He was a Colombian man who had just finished his shift at work and he had really been embracing simplicity and providing for his family and being able to give himself an hour a day to just sit in the park and just enjoy himself and revel in the bliss of life. And I spoke about my experience of the loneliness that I felt. We dissected the trip that I'd had a little bit and what lied ahead of me in my travels. And I gave him the rest of my truffles, probably enough to sedate the whole of Amsterdam, but he was very welcome. He was very welcoming to the fact that I gave him a gift. So I thanked him for the conversation and I said goodbye. And I felt such an exhilaration when I was walking back after that conversation I had had with that man. I felt such accomplishment, I felt such acceptance, and I felt such connection as well that I couldn't stop smiling. I felt so happy I began to become paranoid of my happiness because I walked past a girl after and she smiled at me and all of a sudden I was thinking, oh my God, I'm back in the social world, I'm back. And I realised that all it takes is one conversation for your life to change completely. Because a month after that first day of me travelling and having that crisis of meaning, albeit brought on by a mushroom trip completely alone in a country I've never been in before, but after that conversation with this man, I had the best month of my whole life. And I think if I never had that conversation with that man, I probably would have turned home and not met a lot of the friends that I have today, and I wouldn't have been able to sit in front of you today and be able to tell you this story. So, dissecting this story, I want to emphasise the point of going first, going positive and being constant in doing it. Because there's a common phrase that your fulfilment or your happiness is on the other side of fear. I agree with that, but I also think there's a social element as well. Regardless of whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or if you feel awkward in social conversations or you struggle in initiating social conversations, your fulfillment, your contentment, your happiness, your joy in life is on the side of the other side of one conversation. Now, when I reflect on my other things that have happened in my life, a lot of them, as I usually say, have come from a place of stillness and not grasping. But a lot of the opportunities that have come my way have literally just come from me sparking up a conversation with someone out of sheer curiosity. And there's a common idea that if you show up consistently enough, then fortune, world, God, whatever you call it, will give you a sufficient amount of opportunities. And unpacking the quote, go first, go positive and being constant in doing it, when I first heard that, it became such a liberating thing to practice in social situations, because I realised that I no longer had to wait for someone else to start a conversation. I no longer had to wait for connection to be built. All of a sudden it became my responsibility, and when you take it upon yourself to start social situations or start social interactions, you put others at a tremendous ease, because people are dying to be flirted with, people are dying to be spoken to, and also to the extent that you're willing to engage with other people and say hello and start a normal conversation, ask how someone's day is, or ask a conversation that is a little bit more nuanced, you open a door for yourself. In a way that when you play a video game and you see characters on the map, you know, an NPC, and they could be a potential segue or initiation into a side quest that your character on the game needs to complete, so it is with other people in your life as well. The people who, I'm getting very philosophical here, it's the sun, it changes everything, boys and girls. The people that you see on the streets, albeit you're not going to go and speak to everyone, but everyone has such an immense world that is undiscovered. See people as territory, undiscovered land, an undiscovered planet or country that is waiting to be discovered, is screaming out to be discovered as well. And the amount of opportunities that will come your way if you just start to practice being a little bit social. Now look, dissecting the story that I told, I fumbled completely. Oh, you could say I fumbled. I felt like I fumbled because I felt so awkward going up to that man, and in the most simplest way, without any social riz or any specific conversation starting techniques, I used the oldest trick in the book. Hi, can I have a conversation with you? I feel lonely. And he said yes, because it takes quite a psychopath to turn around and say no, or a really busy person to turn around and say no. So to round this up, before I get even more preachy, I think the best way to frame other people in your life is as the end within themselves. People aren't means to achieve a certain goal that you have. They are the ends. Life is for people and life is about people. That's what I believe. And you're always one conversation away from a completely different life. A conversation that could change your perspective, enlighten you to a new idea or a deeper realization than the one that you already have, or a new opportunity for work, for a relationship, for travel. But until you open up and take the responsibility to go first, go positive and be constant in doing it, the connections and the opportunities are like latent tools, idle tools that are locked away, safe in a chest, bursting to come out. But until you knock on the door, they won't be revealed to you. So knock and the door shall be opened, and go first, go positive and be constant in doing it. The sun changes everything. Nos vemos, muchachos.